Hello and welcome to today's WIEF I Empower on Creative Industry, Harnessing Emerging Technologies. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our amazing moderator for today. She is the founder of Origin of Mind from USA, a lifestyle brand and e-commerce platform designed to raise awareness around and channel support for critical social issues. She is also a product leader, software engineer, and writer committed to building inclusive tech and teams. Now, please welcome Alex Fox. Over to you, Alex.
Hi, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I'm super excited to be here and super excited to introduce your panelists to you today. It's really lovely to see such a global group with us, and I'm really, really excited to get the conversation going about creative industry and the digital industry and how they merge and intersect. So to get started, as I introduce the panelists, I wanted to kind of ground us all and hear from each of our speakers how they would answer this question: how do you view and define yourself as a creative? So I'll start with Marina. She is in addition to leading her roles, leading her architecture firm in Bangladesh, she's also a visiting professor at several major universities, including BRC in Bangladesh, Harvard Graduate School of Design, and others. She's also a multi-hyphenate, award-winning architect. And one of the awards was for a mosque in Bangladesh, which I really hope comes up in conversation today, because I learned that about you this week, and I'm hoping we get a chance to talk about it. So Marina, I'll start with you. How do you view or define yourself as a creative?
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. Whoever is listening, good morning, good afternoon. Well, how do I define myself as a creative? I'm an architect, as you just mentioned. I'm a practicing architect and I design, so I'm a designer. And most of my day is spent in designing buildings, details, spaces, urban interventions. So there are all different kinds of spectrums that we design. And, the thing is, architecture is not a virtual medium. So whatever we design has to be physically realized on a site. So our creativity is very much governed by the gravity, social and economic and cultural norms of a place. So it's a creative process where reality and let's say virtual ideas or imaginations come together to a certain kind of a reality. Just to give you an idea, at the moment in the office, we are designing, let's say, a 250-bed hospital on one side of the spectrum. And on the other end, we are also designing food distribution outlets for the Rohingya refugee camps. That's the kind of variation that you see. So in one side, you have this very highly sophisticated building that needs to withstand earthquakes. And on the other side, you have these projects where you're not even allowed to build anything permanent. It has to be something very temporal with, like bamboos and a tarpaulin, let's say. So every project comes with its own unique challenges. And our creativity is about taking that challenge and giving it the best possible outcome to give a better living environment. So that's how I would say I would define my creativity. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marina. I'm so excited to hear from you today. I recently read this article. It's called The Story a Building Tells, something like this. And it's about, how much we learn just from the way that these buildings are architected. So I'm so excited for you to bring that perspective. Okay, I would like to introduce Peter Gould. Peter leads a strategic design team. He's primarily based in Australia, but the team is across Sydney, Jakarta, and Dubai. And their clients have spanned from the UN to Greenpeace, to private companies, to NGOs, to government organizations. And I've also personally really benefited from his work in championing heart-centered design and design that really starts from a place of value and self and purpose. So I'm so excited to meet in this forum today and talk, and would love to hear you, Peter, kick us off with how you view or define yourself as a creative.
Hey, Alex, and assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for taking the time, everyone. I know it's an era of a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of virtual meetings, so really appreciate people taking an extra moment to be with us and share, and look forward to our panel today. And also, I think we have some wonderful, inspiring people attending, so look forward to your questions and having a great discussion. So yeah, thanks, Alex. I think thinking about my own creative practice and how I kind of think about creativity, it's a big word. And it kind of applies to, many aspects of daily life. I think I'd say professionally, in running our design team, which I've been growing for about the last 2 decades, it's applying what you might call strategic creativity. So this is, trying to solve a particular problem or work with the client to, grow their business or reach more people. But I think at a more important level, it's trying to, how do you creatively develop work that's meaningful, that actually, touches people's hearts or inspires some kind of change or encourages them to transform, or maybe just make them smile, or, maybe just illuminate their day a little bit better, when there's lots of other things happening in the world that, especially now that creativity can go a long way there. So I think trying to design products, brands, experiences, platforms, sometimes toys and games, whatever it might be, to apply creative there. But also just in daily life, I'm a dad, I have 3 kids, so there's a lot of creativity required to, especially during a lockdown, to be a parent and to, navigate all the fun things and challenges that comes with. And just as a seeker, someone on a spiritual path, trying to understand and apply creativity and navigate through the changes that come with life. I think that requires creativity and an understanding of where that creativity comes from, and how that spiritual perspective can really benefit the work you might do, or the team you're trying to lead, and the life that you're trying to use as a way to positively help other people. So yeah, big word, creativity, but I know we have a whole panel to explore that as well. So thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Peter. I'm really excited to talk about this from this new aspect with you today. And what you said about kind of using creativity in terms of strategy segues well into our next panelist to introduce, Raymond. Raymond is a Senior Vice President of Investment and Brand, as well as CMO, not only leading international brands and conglomerates, but also to help run trainings and workshops in these key areas, and think about how are people thinking about branding and creative and strategy across Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. So I'm super excited to hear more from Raymond about, perspectives on our digital future as we talk about the intersections of the creative industry and digital industry. And Raymond, same question. How do you view or define yourself as a creative?
That's a really interesting question. For me, at least, I did law. Never went into practice. Disappointed my Indian parents. But loved writing. Absolutely loved it, and moved into writing very quickly, and built a career around PR, communications, branding. It kind of evolved as it went on. So for me, it's being creative. It's all about coming up with original ideas, being original to yourself. And so you absorb whatever's around you, whatever's inside of you, and come up with original ideas. And there's an element of never being satisfied with the status quo, right? And you really want to push your envelope to see what else can be next, what else can you do next, right? And it's really also, for me at least, being creative is about being impulsive. I'm not afraid to change my mind to the, not to my teams. What do you call that? They're not very happy with it, at times. But really, that's something I think I'm not afraid to do, right? And to take risks. So I think being creative is to really push yourself and really try and be original to yourself, absorbing the ideas and discussions and all that around you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Raymond. I'm so excited for our panel. We have such a representation of different perspectives, and I think what's coming through across all of us, and a few of you have said, is that the ways in which we think about creativity can be applied really in any setting, and how we think about that is really rooted in, you know, our own passions and kind of our own knowledge. So with the introductions, I'll just remind all the attendees that the Q&A is open. So at any time, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in there and I will be able to see it and pick it up, inshallah. Okay, so to kind of center ourselves in this discussion, I wanted to start with a fairly broad question, which is, how does the creative industry adapt to and benefit from the digital world? And would love to hear, you know, individual perspectives on kind of how they're seeing this in terms of the current landscape today, and what stands out to them most.
So I think we're looking at you, Raymond. But should I go ahead and?
Well, I was waiting if Alex tells any of us to go first.
Peter, you got it.
So all right. So we are going like Marina, Peter, and Raymond. Okay, great. So all right. So yeah, I mean, I can talk about my industry, which is architecture. Actually, we've been digitized for a very long time. Let's say from the mid-90s, we've already gone digital in many ways. Especially, and you know, if I talk about architecture, there's so many different facets. Let's say it starts from planning or site, all the information that you gather, then you come to design, and then comes the drawings and coordinations, and then the construction. And after that, you have the building, which goes through its own life and maintenance and everything. So it's a complete sequence of activities that goes on in an architecture world, especially construction world. So if I start with, let's say, getting information from the site, that's where we all start our projects. And we have been having digital survey, let's say satellite survey, from 25 years ago. So, you know, we have topographic survey, and nowadays, and you can actually pinpoint every single tree and everything on site. So, which wasn't possible, let's say, before that. So, I think we're very blessed that when I got into the industry as an architect to practice, we already had the digital platform where we could easily get the drawings and start our work on a digital plan. But at the same time, I think what's interesting to see is also that we have now drone coming in, and drone is an absolutely very important tool for us, because where physically it's not possible to go, let's say, if you have a large forest, or let's say, and I can give you a very interesting example, which is the city of Aleppo, right after it got bombed and destroyed in the last war. Immediately there were drones sent to get an idea about the damage that has happened, so that a rebuilding activity can take place later on to understand the damages. And so you can, from that, you can actually understand. And since there is a good documentation, let's say, of an old city like Aleppo, it's easier then to understand. So you can archive, you can document. So all these are possible. And then once you get these drawings and information, it comes to our office. I personally, being an old school, I prefer starting with my sketches. I mean, and I do not think there is any alternate to that. I would, that is a part I would never think that should get digitized. You should definitely, you know, have your mind and your body and your hand working together to come up with an idea as a creative. But once you've gone through the process, then definitely when it comes to drawings, we do use AutoCAD, ArchiCAD, Adobe Illustrators, we have Revit. There's so many different softwares, Grasshopper, Rhino, you know, there's limitless softwares. Nowadays you have BIM, Beam. So you use all these different softwares to create your drawings, which is, I think, a blessing in our time. And at the same time, you can coordinate with all the different engineers who's doing your structure, your plumbing, your mechanical and electrical. So, you know, so it's so much easier now to coordinate, and then to send the drawings to construction site where they can easily take that on. But at the same time, we also have these So that's basically the construction part. Then again, you have the other part where you have softwares where you can create three-dimensional modeling, walkthroughs, and animations to get your design idea across to, let's say, people who do not understand drawings in that sense. And also it helps us also to understand how our building is designed, the spaces, how it performs, also to understand the light and let's say the airflow and everything. So there are so many ways of simulating all that. So it's really a blessing to have these digital forms. Even modeling, when we do physical model of a building, it's now you can use laser cutters, you can use CNC, you have 3D printers. 3D printers can even make buildings these days. So, we've gone to that sophistication. So I think, I think I should stop basically, but as I said, that this is the kind of spectrum we're already working in terms of digital,
Thank you so much, Marina, for kicking us off. Before we circle back, I'll go Peter next. Would love to hear your thoughts on how you're thinking about this space of what it looks like now, the way that the creative industry adapts and benefits from digital.
Yeah, thanks. Well, and thanks, Marina. I've only also recently started to learn about Marina's awesome work and really inspiring. And if anyone hasn't come across that work, it's really wonderful and inspiring. So, it's really a joy to hear how your journey through that. I was going to be a bit cheeky, Alex. I hope it's okay, and flip the question a little. So it was sort of thinking about how does the creative or design industry, for example, adapt and benefit from the digital world? But I might think of I think we're at a place where maybe creative industries and design teams or design thinkers could try to benefit the digital world in terms of, rather than being sort of reactive and sort of facing the technology changes that are more and more designed for attention and distraction and pulling us to something else. I would say the traditional kind of role of designers, whatever label you kind of give them going back through the centuries, is trying to solve the real needs of people and trying to be kind of in the path of service. And maybe if you go back 500 years to traditional craftspeople in traditional Islamic cities, they wouldn't use the word designer necessarily, musammim or tasmim necessarily, but there's a beauty and a richness that would be coming through and serving the needs of people, not just in practical day-to-day world and tools, but also the state of their heart, trying to, I think, encourage remembrance or something beautiful. So I think there's a lot we could learn from our creative legacy and heritage of thinking about what are we really trying to design? What is the role of our creative industry more broadly? Can we revisit a more holistic view of design and bring a complementary approach to the digital experience that we have day to day? So of course we're benefiting all right now from these wonderful digital tools. I'm able to sit with you, Alex. I've never met Alex, but we've connected on different platforms. We've probably got mutual friends through this wonderful hyper-connected digital world. And we're aware of some of the dangers of, if we become too digital and hyper distracted from just taking a walk in the natural world. There's something profound about that experience. So I know it's a little cheeky, but I think the questions that we can ask is very valuable. So thinking about what are we designing, why are we designing it, really not just thinking about we need to launch a product and get more sales and grow more users and think about valuations and exits. All these things are important to build a sustainable ecosystem of business and companies. But I'd love to invite our creative industry to be a little more holistic in our definition of project success. That said, I'm a geek. I've been a little bit of an early adopter since, I could start using a Commodore 64. I love digital technology. I was always the guy trying to buy, the day one Apple devices back when that was a thing. So, don't get me wrong. I think, we should embrace, explore, experiment, but let's have a more harmonious understanding of how we can work together. And you could talk about AI in that way. You could talk about VR, rather than just seeing what that technology will do to us. And let's think about how we can serve the needs of people, and think deeply on those kind of questions. So yeah, I'll let Raymond answer, because I think we'll have a complementary. I think Raymond's probably got a lot of experience working with companies that are trying to explore those questions too.
Yeah. So, Alex, unless you have a question for me, I can just lift off on what Peter has said. Yeah. So, the creative scene, or the digital creative scene in Malaysia has really exploded, right? We're looking at a CAGR of about 6% year on year till 2018. And over the last 2 years, especially during the pandemic, of course, it's gone up, substantially. But for me, the creative industry has traditionally been very quick adopters of technology, right? And they are usually at the forefront of adopting various tools and softwares that is coming to market. And we look at creative technology across the spectrum, right? So we have, for example, animation as one sector. We've got the game development sector as the other. We've got VFX, AR as the other. We've got ebooks really coming up now, and that's being added on with voice commands, controls, to get that into a larger audience, especially the younger kids. So being creative, as I said earlier on, doesn't for me is not limited to the visual arts, but now it just cuts across all the sensory elements that we have. And so the way that the Malaysian government is looking at it, or especially through MDEC, is that we want to empower this different vertical, so to speak, in this ecosystem, to see how they intersect and come together. And really now, the delivery of that content is via digital, right? Because you're building that content up using technology, and technology is literally moving on a day-to-day, if not week-to-week basis. It is really moving that fast. What we've seen also is that there are many open source free applications and tools that are being put out there that lends itself to greater collaboration, right? So right now I sit in Kuala Lumpur. I'm here talking to someone in the Bahamas, and working off in New York in different time zones, but really on one collaborative tool. So the technology is there. And that really allows the creative process now to open up, right? And so now the delivery of that content now is critical, because we're looking at now the channels, right? The digital channels. And that has also evolved, right? So to Marina's point and Peter's point, if you're getting drones to do that, right? Drones to give you the drawing sitting in an office millions of miles, thousands of miles away, for example. And so what we're looking at here is that how do we get the content, firstly, on different channels? For example, TikTok has evolved tremendously from just short form entertainment videos to now instructional learning videos. State governments in Malaysia have used that for tourism promotion activities, very quick tourism campaigns on TikTok. And then, of course, you've got the likes of Binumi, you've got the likes of Snapchat and many others there, right? In addition to your YouTube and the rest. So how do we bring all of this in together is something that we are looking at, empowering. And because at the end of the day, the consumers have X amount of screens to look at, or who's on the other side. I've got 3 screens. I've just been told that I need to shut off the sound on 2 of those, right? I'm scrambling around that. And that's the reality of it. That is the reality. My kids watch TV with my handphone beside them, another gaming screen beside them, and it's all consuming creative content, at some point. So I think things are going to change, but what's more importantly is the convergence or the intersection of technology and the creative mind, and then the delivery channels that we have will make it very interesting up front for us.
One thing that's really interesting to hear from 3 folks with different perspectives or coming at this in different angles, I think is this question that came up for me, or this thought that came up for me as Peter was speaking about, what is the kind of, not only how does digitalization or digital world impact creatives, but how do we influence the direction of digitalization, or how do creative industry or creative people think about that. And it made me think about like this word itself, or this idea itself of design or designer, and how like reflections on our greatest designer. How can we start with intention? How can we influence and think about outcomes? And Raymond mentioned a lot of interesting things, which I'm curious to get a little bit of perspective from others around, of ways in which we've seen this in multiple spheres, right? So greater collaboration is one, but also this plethora of outlets or delivery forms. And I'd love to hear from folks how they've really seen this come together, either positively or negatively, specifically in the past year during the pandemic. So what trends have you seen that have either been, sped up or slowed down in positive or negative ways from the COVID pandemic specifically? And how has that kind of shaped some of the areas that you talked about, whether it be delivery or collaboration, or ways in which you're kind of approaching this space in general?
Right. Marina, would you?
Okay.
Let's start with Marina.
So basically COVID-19, as we know that, it really brought us to a very challenging time where you need to, first of all, the thing where I thought that it was probably going to 2 months and then it will go away, which now is running 2 years. And definitely we have to come up with ways how we can do our works, being in a situation where we are in a lockdown, and then the lockdown is over, then again we're in a lockdown. So I think it's going to go on for another few years. So we need to kind of find our way and adjust ourselves within this capacity. Construction industry, as you know, well, one is the physical part, which definitely gets a lot more. It was, at least in our case, for the one last year, we found it quite difficult to actually go to site and start building, because it's much more of a physical contact. But as far as design was concerned, while we were in lockdowns, we were in our own house and working remotely. Design, as far as concerned, since we are already working digitally, it wasn't that difficult. Of course, I missed these coordination meetings where we come together, we sit with a model and we think about it, or we discuss. So there is something about being in a place physically discussing. It's not just about seeing the image of someone on Zoom, or let's say Teams, or even Google Meet, or any other, all the different platforms that we have at this moment. But it's also about being together, and there is so much that you can do when you are physically present in the studio and designing. So I really missed that. For me, it was really not the best. Definitely, we are passing design through. Let's say we have our Google Drive, we have iClouds and spaces where you can put your drawings and someone can update that, and those things were done, and it can work. But at the same time, I really felt that closeness of being with people. So I don't know how we can solve that. We are at the moment working in office, since we don't have lockdown, with all the measures that's necessary, with mask and maintaining the distance and everything. But in the sites, that's still a real big challenge, because you have to be there to build. But at the same time, if somebody would come and say, well, why don't we have 3D printers doing our buildings? I'm really not for that, really, also, because the people who work in the industry, they you also have to think about the job that it creates and the economy that it generates. And it really helps, not just helps, it's an absolute mandatory for us to think about this whole spectrum, where it is giving actually life to a lot more amount of people than just thinking about productivity. So there's this social agenda. There is also that you need to think of. So I really do not know how we can solve the site related issues. We are trying to be as cautious as possible when we are going to sites, or whoever is working on the site, to maintain all the different precautions. But at the same time, I think so far it hasn't been so difficult to work. At the same time, I'm also teaching, as you know. So I was teaching TU Delft Studio last semester, and obviously my studio students generally come to Bangladesh because the city, it's about Dhaka studio. So students generally travel, and this time they were not able to travel. So we had to send all the information, digital information, and all the entire studio was also taking place online. And with online, you just have to adjust the timing. But other than that, it was possible. But you know what you miss when you are not here physically is something that cannot be replaced with images and videos and whatever you send them. You know, being somewhere physical there is no alternate to that. So I really hope that we get out of this situation soon enough to at least have some normalcy in that sense. Peter.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Marina. I, as you were speaking, something came to mind. Actually, just this week, I was in one of our many countless Zoom live calls. Zoom is now a life skill, you know, and how many times a week we must hear, "You're on mute," or you know, some other thing. And it was someone calling from the UK, and he was sharing a beautiful presentation about leadership, change, transformation, and he used a white paperboard, and he drew two Chinese characters on Cantonese, and he said these are the word for crisis in Cantonese has these two characters, one meaning threat or danger, and the next one meaning opportunity. So you can go and quote him. I don't know the original language, but of course that's in many cultures, and in it's maybe different vocabulary slightly. But it reminded me of last year, as things were really starting to transform quickly and became very much a global adversity, where everyone is having this, maybe not in the same boat, but the same storm. And I reached out to one of my longtime mentors, Maria Judis is her name. She's in San Francisco. She had a beautiful design company, which was acquired by Facebook in a different, when we thought of Facebook maybe differently. Anyway, she ran a wonderful course late last year, early this year, and it was about design and design leadership through a transformation. And one of my favorite slides was when she shared some research by some academics that were exploring and had come up with a really good framework for what was called post-traumatic growth. And this is, I guess, what I'd be thinking about as a design team, as a company, and for the clients we're working with, is what is that opportunity there? And the feeling was that the research was suggesting that people suggested they were open to new possibilities, despite the challenge and the trauma of this massive change all of a sudden, finding a personal strengths and finding that opportunity through that growth, relating to others better, like having a little bit more empathy or understanding, being this global awareness of others going through similar challenges, maybe different ways, appreciation of life, just the how many parents have reported now that despite the incredible difficulties of being at home, maybe homeschooling, just having those simple times with your children that you may not have had. And I'm definitely in that camp if, I was traveling a lot, and, just those simple things. And spiritual change is another thing that came out that was in the Stanford research as well. So I think there is this incredible opportunity individually. And I think in terms of design has always been about change. Tim Brown's IDEO, Change by Design, it's over 10 years old now, but it's still really the book that helped define what we think of design thinking, which is really just another way of explaining, serving the needs of people. And in a time of great adversity and challenge and difficult big problems, complex and wicked problems, design really helps us ask the right questions and helps us transform through adversity. So I think designers and creative industries are really well placed to help us lead through this difficult time. The things we're designing, it could be simple little products, or it might be ways of enabling better access to other people, but finding beautiful creative solutions to all the things that many of us are experiencing personally, professionally, in our communities. this is an exciting time to be a designer. Maybe things in your career aren't going how you'd planned. I was going to be at this company. I was going to be in this brainstorming session. I was going to be doing this. But now we're all in the big team together now. We are trying to navigate through these together, and design leadership is essential. And inviting people to be there, bring their creativity to this time is really essential. So it's a very exciting time, I think, to embrace our design mindset, whatever label you use or work company you work for. We're all designing together now, I think.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump right in again and say that the offset line is art is the soul of a nation, right? And that really holds true. To Marina's point earlier on, that this has gone on for 2 years. I was just discussing this with my wife yesterday. It's my twins' birthday today. They're both 8 years old, and they've not gone out of the house for about 6 months. Right, even for cycling is just right outside the house and back in, right? So what then happens is that at 7 to 8, when your mind is at its best, and we think it through schools or art school or whatever it is, right? They're getting creative in the house, right? They're using whatever they can in the kitchen, in my bedroom, and whatever else on the garden, doing stuff, right? Grandparents' birthday, they're creating stuff, they're on Zoom calls to send stuff across, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Art really is a reflection of your soul, or a nation's soul, right? And I think that now it's more important than ever. I think it's seminal times now for us to say, listen, we can use our creativity to either be divisive or to be inclusive. Right, and we can see that creativity being used in many ways or forms. So I go back to propaganda, right? Way back when, where we've seen that, right? In multi-hued formats, right? And I think pop art was a way that we saw creativity coming out at that point of time. But now you see harking back towards politicians using symbols and others, and that's being creative too, yeah. To bring a certain group or masses together. So why can't we use creativity as a force for good? I think we are. I think a lot of us are, right? And now with the advent of technology and with the advent of digital, that creative thought, that little idea, that spark can really go very, very quickly across the world, right? And that sharing is happening, and people are taking from there, right? The hashtags and the ideas and how we just traverses ethnicity, race, geography. It also then comes back in to say that now I'm getting new ideas, right? Just seeing what's happening in various parts of the world, and can I copy, adapt, or start something new completely? Whether it be in architecture, buildings, right? Moving on to new designs which are eco-friendly. Am I getting some ideas going back to nature, and nature being rejuvenated in this last 2 years? What am I really thinking of, right? Can I use that in terms of clients? And Peter, you probably know this as well, right? Because we deal with many clients from various industries. We're looking at purpose, creativity for a purpose, right? So whether it's animation or design tools or design features, what can be more sustainable? And I think that's really important, right? And these are not full things, right? Things are just coming up. I just want to go on one step further, and I think you guys saw this just about a couple of days ago. Coca-Cola going on to NFTs, right? Non-fungible tokens, right? And you see a lot of brands going into NFTs as well. And that's coming up. That is, as we saw crypto happening over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I remember this in Davos when I was there a couple of years ago, where blockchain and crypto was very important. I see NFTs as using blockchain technology coming up, and a lot of creatives are already in that space, right? So as we talk about purpose, as we talk about this, we can see technology almost necessitating new forms of creativity. Right, and that's really interesting also for me, because it just blows open what creativity really means, and for what purpose again, right? Do we use that?
Raymond, I love that you brought up the propaganda posters example. I'm a big fan of propaganda posters. The Vietnam
Yeah.
propaganda posters, Russia or the communist ones are really amazing. And one of the
Obama did that as well. I mean, if you look at some of the visual,
yeah, they're intense.
you
Yeah,
know,
they're intense. You'll find Nixon's head on a spear, other alternate alterations of pretty graphic displays. But it really makes me think of this idea of like the power of people. A lot of what we've talked about today or floated around is the way in which people, generally speaking, have now gotten access to or are plugged into online. And when we think about propaganda posters too, it's kind of this idea of, you know, culture has a lot of power for change, and mobilizing of people behind a certain idea or toward a certain path can be really, really powerful. And I feel like that kind of is coming together with this other concept that I've heard from each of your responses, just looking at the COVID pandemic, that really stood out to me when Marina was talking about, you know, how work sites specifically have come to a halt because they're something that depends on, you know, physical labor, versus some of the other teams. Those of us who have privilege to work remotely can still do that. And it reminds me of the ways in which, you know, pandemics or even technology can kind of highlight inequities in our society. So I'd love to talk about how we see the creative industry or designers being a positive force for change in this aspect. How do we see the creative industry kind of using new digital tools or using new technology to help be that force for greater social equity? And maybe a good question to kind of start us off with is one from the audience here from Novita. And the question is, how can we give awareness about creating technology for people who are not just creatives or professionals, but people in rural areas? How can we think about creating or designing technology to connect those from who are kind of, you know, historically disconnected to people outside of their areas? So that could be one kind of kickoff for us to think about that question. But also opening it more broadly to how do you see the role of the creative industry or creatives in using technology and digitization as a tool for social change? And I might go ahead, Raymond.
That's a really interesting question. So creativity can come up from anywhere, right? We're not limited with any geographical boundaries. We've seen that throughout humankind. You know, from the time drawings in the caves were done, and that's really creativity back then till now, right? So it doesn't matter where you are to get creative. I think what is really important is the societal embracing ideas, right? And because that's what creativity is. You're going to go against the norm, right? It's not a herd mentality. So you could be in a kampong or we call in a village, you know, in a little district somewhere in Malaysia. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't stifle. And a lot of our artists, and I say across the board, from digital artists, you know, creative guys who've done very well at Cannes, you know, Malaysians have done there as well, are not necessarily born in the urban areas, right? And if you trace back, you know, their formative years, it was really seeing their parents absorbing the environment and thinking about, you know, being original to yourself, and that spark, that idea that came, and it was nurtured by the society or the community they were around, right? So I think depending on where you are, or it doesn't depend on where you are, it really depends on yourself first, whether you're true to your ideas and your creativity, and then, you know, if you have that nurturing community, that will help. Number two is the access to technology. I must agree that it's not ubiquitous, right? It's not very easy to get technology out to the outlying areas. That is also dependent upon the hardware as well as the connectivity that we can bring to those places. So from a Malaysia point of view, you know, we're rolling out the 5G networks. We've got 4G coverage throughout Malaysia. Internet penetration is, you know, 80%. You know, so we're trying to push that through, because in this current environment, you can work from anywhere, right? Work from home works. And creativity, like I said earlier on, can be sparked from anywhere. So I think that's really important to say that if you're not out working in an office, you can do many other things in your house with access to connectivity, and with simple technology and a desktop or a laptop, even with a phone. Yeah. So we've got programs, for example, called Saya Digital. That means I Digital, right? Saya means me, I Digital. And that program, Saya Digital, is being rolled out throughout Malaysia, with the students and with also the what we call warga emas, the golden citizens, right? So 55 and above as well. And we're saying that, listen, with WhatsApp and with very simple things like, say, WhatsApp video and social commerce, you can get on there. You can be a bit creative if you want to sell your, for example, your, what do you call that, sewing, or your cookies, or whatever creative ideas that you want to come up with just that WhatsApp video and WhatsApp social commerce, you can actually monetize and push your creativity a lot further, right? You're able to get into like-minded communities. And we're pushing that agenda very, very strongly, right? To say that, it doesn't mean that if you don't have access to office and all that, that you cannot be creative. You can, and you should. And so that training, that hand-holding is what we're doing, right? The other aspect is also low Earth orbit satellites, LEO satellites, that will then help us provide connectivity to, for example, in Borneo, it's really quite difficult to put towers and to get, connectivity out there. But with satellite connectivity, we're getting creative to try and ensure that over the next 3, 4, 5 years, that, it becomes a utility, right? It becomes a right to have internet access. And I think that will even spark even more creativity and access to the opportunities in the creative industry.
Yeah, that's interesting. What I'm hearing from you, Raymond, it sounds like you actually feel like, the internet coming online is actually, it can be an equalizer in terms of giving people the ability to express themselves. And once we kind of solve the problem of providing that access to coming online and making sure that people have the same ability to kind of join, then the challenge there is really to find your communities. We'll work backwards this time. Peter, I would love to hear from you on this and how you think about this question of, the role of design in terms of creating greater equity.
Yeah, awesome question. And thanks, Raymond and Alex. It's just an incredibly exciting time. If you read, for example, I think people, like, on one side of the spectrum, you have the great optimists. So it's people like Peter Diamandis, who writes about abundance and will give many examples of how in creating that access to and democratizing internet wherever, and examples of, like, Google Loon project sending zeppelins over parts of Africa to create internet access some years ago. And then Peter talks about bringing the next 3 billion people online in Africa. And I just think, as someone, and all of us here probably in the audience as well, accessing just incredible opportunities of collaboration, of learning, of being able to interact with different perspectives, just in that immediacy of the challenge then becomes how you navigate that, and how do you find meaning in that, and how do you find meaningful collaborations and solving the right problems. So I'm a little bit in that camp of just being very excited about that potential. And just that there's a phrase I kind of borrow a little, is we may not be necessarily like-minded. We probably wouldn't be globally like-minded, but we can be like-hearted. So like-hearted is we have a common vision to do something positive. And it's not just about creating access to technology. There's people working on that. I think, there's the infrastructure that right. I think that is, it sounds like we're making great progress there in terms of creating that access, but it's what we do with that and how we invite people. How do we learn? How do we, don't come from a place of, all right, we know this is the way, follow us, but, leaning into, millions and millions of young people that are growing up in a different world and how they might see it, what little ideas they might have that actually completely transform and change our understanding of how to solve certain problems. We're going to rely on that. And, everyone on this panel, like, you know, we're at a certain point in life, but there's a lot of young people across Southeast Asia, MENA region, who are just going to bring some incredible change, and I can't wait to see that. And it's part of the reason why, you know, alhamdulillah, I have a team of 25 designers. We have about 10 staff in Southeast Asia and around Indonesia and Malaysia, Singapore. And in the Middle East, we have some designers in Beirut, in Dubai, and we work with people in Saudi and US and UK. And there's a common thread among all of us in that I like to think we are like-hearted, but everyone's thinking a little differently. Everyone is bringing something to the table, and the increasingly the skills we'll need to have are not necessarily technical, but how do you be a great leader? How do you have empathy? How do you inspire people to work on, how you know, those leadership skills, those creative skills of running teams, being able to unite people around a vision and work remotely, but lead a team remotely is a challenge and a capability that a lot of us will have to invest in. I think there'll be more and more teams like ours. Of course, we're just one of many millions, but that's very promising, you know. And I have 3 kids, and my 13-year-old, I think about what kind of world she's coming into, where, just like Raymond said, a lot of homeschooling, you know, but their digital world, what their access to that content, the rate at which they consume content is almost alarming. So what is coming back to that question, and then I'll pause, is what are we creating? Like, what is the content we're creating? What are we trying to do through that? Are we just trying to get more users, clicks and attention, or you know, to serve kind of shareholders and serve a, you know, corporate tech company? Or are we trying to nurture happy people? Are we trying to let people reconnect with a deeper sense of purpose and invite them to a spiritual place, you know, that they may not be getting? There's a favorite quote that I'll pause, was someone asked a Netflix CEO, I think it's a CEO or a senior designer, you know, who's your biggest competition? Who's the main competitor to the Netflix? He said the biggest competitor to Netflix is sleep. And I thought, okay, that's not a healthy sign of what's happening, but it was quite profound. So anyway, I'll pause there. Maybe Marina, I'd love to hear. I think Marina's probably actually got a lot of really direct, relevant experience for this question.
Yeah, well, thanks. You know, I live in a country like Bangladesh, where we do have a lot of social inequity in that sense, where you see people of different strata, where you have lower income. We even have people who has no income, or let's say ultra low income people. So basically, there is so much you can do, actually, if you want to create a social equity through design or creativity. So in some of our projects, we've tried to address that. And there are many ways you can address these issues. We designed a resort project in the south of Bangladesh, which is very much in the vernacular tradition. And the idea was, obviously, people want to understand where they are. So people, instead of having a regular building which you are more used to in a city, you would rather have something which is a vernacular, to go to a place and to really enjoy that. So that was the idea. And so what we did is we engaged locals to come and build with us. So, you know, you generate a local economy by that way. So it's a kind of a trying to understand, giving them or a way of giving back to the people from whom you're taking the land, and building something which is completely new. So in a way, it's a kind of a rapture in the environment. So in that sense, you try to give back. But while we were doing these kind of projects, we also create this connection, and you understand how people live, what are the possibilities where you can, as a designer, as an architect, you can actually help to build their environment better. It could be for sanitation, let's say toilets, it could be their kitchens, just to have a little difference takes a long way, actually. So we created a lot of workshops, which are participatory workshops. And it's interesting because we have these group of architects, which they themselves call themselves community architects. So they generally go to different communities, be it in the city or in the villages, They go and they really create these nice participatory workshops where you can have, like, if there is a certain kind of a skill, let's say a pottery or weaving or bamboo weaving or even weaving with fabrics and everything, you can create these workshops where you bring in product designers and create a craft diversification workshop that which actually help them again to create new form of products, which where then they could really sell it to the visitors in the in the resort, let's say. So you can create a lot of different ways of doing this. It just doesn't have to be like one single creative entity. And at the same time, we also try to work with the design of the houses. People are more generally interested in build brick houses rather than mud houses anymore these days. So but they do not have the knowledge of making a brick house, let's say. So we try to create this what we call co-creation. So in a process of co-creation, you generally sit with the people who wants to build a house and they have their own aspiration, and you as a designer have the knowledge to help them build that aspiration. So you get together and create something. So there are many, as I said, many ways. A very recent project that we are doing is in the coastal areas of Bangladesh. And I don't know how much you know about Bangladesh, but we have a very dynamic river system where there is a lot of erosion that happens on the river banks, and at the same time new sandbeds comes up in the middle of the river. So it's the whole Ganges delta is a very, very dynamic system, and so people lose land. So there are a lot of landless people who doesn't have any place to live, so they move from one sandbed to another sandbed. So while we were sitting, most of our projects were kind of stopped during this COVID time last year. We at the office, we decided to let's work on a house that could be, it's a house which one can move. So it's something which you can dismantle and reassemble, and it needs to be light so people can carry it. So if they can see that the land will emerge or it will go under the water, they can immediately take it down and take it to a safer location and rebuild it. So we designed something like that, which is a mobile modular structure. And depending on the size of your family, you can add 2 modules or a single module. So, and then we took it to the south of Bangladesh in one of the sandbeds, and the architects were staying there. And you must understand, there is no electricity, there is no running water, nothing whatsoever. So they camped and they made these houses for 4 or 5 different families, just to understand how it withstand the elements of weather. And so, yeah, I mean, we are trying our best to use our creative ideas to reach out to people who really can, we really can help in better their life and living environment. And I think there is an enormous possibility if you want to do that.
I love the example that you gave so much, Marina. And it reminds me of this example that I love, and I'm blanking on the name of the project, but they designed what they were trying to do was design a jacket for refugees. And like, as a refugee, you have like different kinds of use cases. Sometimes you need to be seen, like if you're in the ocean, sometimes you need not to be seen. Sometimes, and a lot of times you need shelter. So they designed this jacket that is also a tent. So you can wear it during the day and then, have a shelter overnight. And it really makes me think of when you talk about this project, how you are really designing something to solve a certain need, which a lot of you have talked about today. But also you bring up this idea that I love of trust. You mentioned, we have a knowledge, and how do we use that to be in service to others, which I think is something very deep and meaningful for all of us. I have a lot of thoughts on the things that everybody said, but I want to make sure we get this question in from Omer, which is, how do you cope with the limitations in different regions on creativity? So I think, what he's getting at, obviously a lot of you have talked about working across different areas of the world. How do you deal with, or how could an individual think about if they're living in an area where maybe there's restrictions like government restrictions on freedom of expression, other limitations? What advice would you have for those individuals, or how have you dealt with that challenge when you've worked on projects in areas that maybe have more expectations or norms around, expression?
So that's a really interesting question, and again, just looking back at history, a lot of the really gritty, creative stuff like Persepolis, for example. I don't know whether you remember that animation that came out, from Iran way back when, right? Persepolis, which is a really good animation, I thought. Comes in from a point of from a place of a deep challenge, right? But creativity doesn't stop. It just doesn't, right? And that's why we are here where we are right now, whether it's the Iron Curtain or whether it's whatever it is. Creativity keeps coming out, and our advice is, or at least my personal advice would be, the various ways that you can be creative, whether it's a poem, whether it's a drawing, whether it's something that you want to scribble down on a piece of paper, assuming you have access to pieces of paper, or to your phone when you want to record it. Keep that going, right? Because the hope floats, and really the creative arts and creativity gives us that hope to move on to something better, right? And it's, for me, creative can also be a catharsis, right? You can also use that as a healing process, as well as something of hope, right? And I'm going on a big picture level, right? So don't give up wherever you are, right? Creativity will come out, and do whatever you need to do, and it doesn't have to be lasting, right? You can do something for the now, and keep it there in whatever places, environment, regimes that you're at. Keep getting at it, and the important thing for me is to also spread that out, right? Get whoever around you, and let's all be creative. Let's do whatever we can in that, because that gives us hope to just move along. And I'm digging here from a different place, but it really does, and the other people like us who are in a more, I suppose, more fortunate, more better space, we don't stop, right? We should do whatever we can, and like I said, creative for good, right? What can we do to push it across different areas? And using creative for a purpose is really what I would say is important.
Thank you, Raymond. Omar, I hope that answers your question. For the other panelists, if you have pressing thoughts, I'll give you a chance in our next questions. But I know just for the audience too, we're kind of nearing wrap up. We have about 15 minutes left. And I want to pose this question from Amy, which is actually a good transition into sort of our last topic of discussion today, around emerging technologies. And Amy has kind of a maybe hopefully lighthearted way for us to segue into that, which is, we talked about a lot of the challenges with working remotely. Her question is around, do folks have any examples of online games or activities that can be done by employees while working from home, something creative, engaging, to help increase the morale? And I know a couple of you have also specifically worked in gaming, so this can be a good example to segue into how gaming and other technologies are kind of changing this landscape.
I'd love to have a go at answering that one. And also, I'm going to partially answer Shafiq's question as well, which I noticed was the next one up there. There is a sort of connection between them, which was about the health, potential health of maybe overuse, or the concerns around living too digitally and being too connected, which is perhaps becoming disconnected. So in terms of the first one, absolutely. So there's I think a real flourish of collaborative digital experiences in every form. This, for example, I have a team called today. We'll have 25 people or so on it. and from different parts of the world, different time zones. And there's a couple of online like browser-based games that we'll kind of interact with, and that's really important because we don't have a water cooler to gather around. We don't have a physical office at the moment where we're all in. So these kinds of shared digital learning bonding kind of experiences, there's going to be a big uptick in those kinds of things. It's already kind of happening, and you see even from a couple of years back, shared watch party or people kind of doing more collaborative online. I feel like it's very, very early embryonic stages of what will become just a normal experience. So the same way that sometimes we still think about gaming as a thing, but if you take an analogy here, it's like when we read a book, we don't call it booking. Like it's just it's just reading. Gaming is I think like that now. It's just another form of media, a different channel that we interact with people of all ages. And so this idea of learning experiences through a gamified, interactive digital content is absolutely going to be the norm for especially young people going through a lot of online digital schooling. The platforms, a lot of them are still a little bit archaic. They're frustrating. The user experience expectations is going to have to really be met by design teams, creative teams. And so I think you'll have a whole generation of people expecting and then building these great, actually useful, collaborative digital experiences. There might be games, there might be learning platforms. And then, coming back to the whole theme of the panel, maybe that will definitely include VR. And VR, again, early days still after all this time. I've been a sort of enthusiast of VR over maybe the last couple of decades, and we've used it in our team, we've used it on projects, we've built some things from VR. Still very early days, but there's a couple of very promising titles and collaborative things that have come out that are actually good and practical, and I really see where that might go. So yeah, I think I'm kind of answering the two. But Shafiq's question about the dangers of that, and parents in particular, maybe, or teachers or whoever it might be, about the lure of that, ultra, saturated digital daily experience, screen time, it just nonstop dopamine hits of like, I need to check in, I need to, see what's happening, the notifications. And, many of us would have seen the Social Dilemma, film, which is free on YouTube this week, by the way. Normally it's just on Netflix. And Tristan Harris and his Center for Exploring These Very Issues is a great documentary and good one to watch with kids of the right age, exploring the dangers of digital tech and screen time. So I think it's a challenge of the age. It's a challenge of the age that we're all trying to navigate together. And rather than coming from a fear-based, like, it's all new, I don't do it. Let's try to, I think, have a bit of optimism. But sometimes it's like rolling our sleeves up. If we're not seeing what we want to see in the world, in the digital platforms that being created, let's create it ourselves. The barrier to entry is much lower now to try a digital product, to create a pilot or an MVP. So don't be afraid to try something out. Even sketch it up, build a simple app with just sketching, paper prototypes. You might be sitting there on a brilliant idea. Don't deprive the world of your creativity. Share that. Try it out. It's very easy to try things out. But if you wait too long, you might regret not trying it.
Thank you so much, Peter. Marina, I'm gonna start with you for our next question from the audience that is also in the space. So the question is from Hafsa, who's coming from Malaysia. Could new technologies empower individuals or make them more vulnerable? This is a really fantastic and interesting question. And I think, you touched on specifically, Marina, ways in which you're kind of working with underserved communities. Would love to hear your perspectives on, how can technology, especially emerging tech, both empower, but also maybe make us communities vulnerable? And if so, how do we guard against those vulnerabilities?
Yeah, well, thank you. There is always a good side and a bad side. There is always a balance. And I think the balance, how much you use technology, technology is at the end of the day a tool that we must always remember that, you are the one who is making a choice of using it. And so for that reason, it's always absolutely onto us to make sure how much of it are we using to the benefit of our, physical, mental well-being. So everything that we have is to give us a better, or let's say to enhance the way we do things, but that should not become the ruler of our lives in many ways. So that's what I believe, and I think you need to strike that balance. And when we are like, when you do Google, let's say, or any search engine, there is so much of information that you are open to, but you need to also devise or learn or create a way of filtering, like what informations you really need and what are you can really not indulge yourself into. Or even you were using social media, or even gaming for that reason. This is entirely, you need to keep a complete, you have to be in complete control of yourself. So that, and that's what I think is the biggest challenge for us, and at the same time our younger generation, is how you use these tools. So it definitely can empower us, but at the same time, overdoing anything is bad, and you can fall into the, WHO has declared, using devices as a certain kind of an epidemic also, as that, it can be addictive. So the addiction, whether you are taking cocaine or watching your mobile constantly, is the same. That's what it is you are losing control of yourself and your ability to make a choice, the right choice. So that is entirely up to us, be it coffee or be it gaming. So I think that's where you need to come and also understand the idea that this is a tool and this can empower us. This can, if we use it properly, it can really enhance life. But at the same time, if you overdo things, it can, destroy in many ways. So that is where I mean, and that's what my advice is quite often, that use it to your best interest and not overdo things. And so, yeah, I mean, even in the villages these days, if I go back to what we were talking about earlier, mobile phones are easily available. People have technology, smartphones are there. People are also in Facebook, even in villages. I don't have a Facebook, but when I go to villages, people have it. And so, there are many ways people can connect, and you can use these tools to empower people. And when we, as I was mentioning, that we did the product design workshops, and then they send photos through their mobile phone to show us what they have created. And you don't need to be there on site physically to explain. You can also connect with them over a phone or through WhatsApp or Viber or any of these platforms where you can connect and discuss the designs and the problems. Or even we even have these women farmers who have their own little farms, and they produce different kind of products, and through the use of phone, they can now sell their products from one place to another. So there are all different networking that has actually happened throughout, and that's how you can empower people. You can use the devices and all the different platforms that are there to the benefit of people. So it can be empowering, and at the same time, overdoing anything is bad. So
thank you so much, Marina. I love you kind of centering us toward the end again on what is our intention, both as creators and consumers in this space, and to help have that guide us in our actions. Okay, so we're about at time. So for all the attendees, thank you so much for your questions. I'm really sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but please do follow the speakers on social media. Hopefully they might be able to kind of interact with you there, or at least you'll be able to follow and hear more from them, inshallah, in the future. Before I pass it back to Ina to close us out, would love if the speakers have maybe like a 30-second, 1 minute thought that they want to leave us with Maybe, you know, we started with kind of looking at the present, maybe looking towards the future, any emerging technologies that you're really interested in, or have an eye toward, or a final thought that you kind of want us to leave this space with. I'll start with Peter. Peter Raymond Marina.
Thanks. I had a feeling you might do that. Look, it's been a really nice panel, and I feel like it's just a spark. We're getting going. Each of these questions can be a whole hour, but I think I'd invite people and remind myself is even a consistent theme that I've seen from all different circles, from academia, from you know, life coaches, from professionals in design consulting firms, is during this time of transformation, really exploring our own, within our own selves, what is that deep sense of purpose? What are we really trying to do here? You know, we have an opportunity, I think, to each of us to reflect and look at how we're spending our time. What are we designing? What are we creating? And of course, whatever we build should be, you know, it should be sustainable. It needs to be healthy. It needs to be a strong, you know, team, organization, business, and have impact that way. But think of what is that inner wealth, perhaps. What is the transformation we can maybe facilitate or hope or invite people to explore at a very personal, meaningful level, thinking about, you know, in our products we're designing, or the brands, or our art or architecture, is trying to connect hearts and, you know, inspire hearts at a very you know, intentional level of what we're trying to design, and what does that mean for each person, and to elevate our questions that we're asking as we design, how we can try and move people and help people in a more holistic way. So that would be my final thought, and thank you again for having me.
Okay, 30 seconds. Go. Well, you know, go back to where we started. I think what makes it, how do you define yourself as a creative, right? For me, you know, I said that, you know, let's try new ideas, let's take risk. I'm impulsive. I'm not afraid to change my mind. So, you know, my exhortation to whoever's listening in, and say, listen, you know, be true to yourself. You can be creative in any sort of environment. Yeah, you can be, right? And you can make a change. So, you know, take it. And if you have the technology, the tools available to you, use that, right? Create new stuff. And if you have your phone, you can then disseminate those ideas, those creative ideas, through your phones. Lucky enough to have a drone, even better, right? But it all starts from up here, right? And I love what you said, Peter, you know, from the heart, right? From the heart. So you combine both of this, I think you're going to come up with something really, really powerful. And that's 30 seconds, I'm sorry.
Raymond, I'm going to put you on the spot and go over my own time limit. I did want to get this one last question from Nasiha, and I know there were a lot of questions from folks in Malaysia, so hope they get a chance to connect with Raymond further, inshallah. But from Nasiha, can you leave us with a trend or prediction for the creative industry in Malaysia?
If there was just one thing, I would say that's going to be AI. Artificial intelligence is going to really change the whole value chain of the creative industry. That is really because of the amount of data that we're getting. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Neural networks, the logarithms of AI that are neural networks. So when you look into Netflix, Spotify, when you see Netflix saying recommended to watch, that is really understanding your habits on how you're watching it, right? And so the creative content is pushed to you. You almost subliminally don't have a choice anymore. It's being pushed to you, right? So that's the other area of you know, what we have to be aware of in terms of how we look at Spotify, Netflix, and all. That's AI. Number two, the likes of the Associated Press, if I'm not mistaken, has already used AI to convert text into so speech into text, which then has now enabled them to do about 30-40% more content than they would have previously, because of a lack of bodies to work on it, right? And that's a creative space as well. AI is also moving into music, where AI developed machines and teams are coming up with brand new sounds and stuff that really humans maybe you know, could not do. So AI data is really going to drive, I believe, the way the creative industry, the value chain is going to develop.
Thank you so much, Raymond. And Marina, please, now back to my limit. Please end us
Yeah,
with
right.
final
30,
thoughts.
30 seconds. Well, I think one thing I would like to probably focus on is the issue of climate change, and which is a reality, by the way. And we are facing it in Bangladesh with the sea level rise, which is already there in place. And it's expected by 2050 we'll have about a 1 meter sea level rise. So I think it's important for us creatives to be to create something which is creativity of relevance. That's what I would like to call it: creativity of relevance, creativity of responsibility. So that's what I would like to sort of finish it here. That whatever you create, think about the humankind, think about the nature, think about where we are, and think about the existential crisis that has been happening over the last few decades. So, think creative, be creative, but with a relevance and responsibility. Thank you.
This is such a perfect place to end. I don't even want to say anything else, except I know, Peter, we've kept you over and it's your daughter's 13th birthday. So everyone from the audience, please wish her a happy birthday. Thank you all again. I'll stop here and pass it back to Ina, but I really so enjoyed speaking with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you to our distinguished guests for being here today and making this webinar successful. Thank you all to all. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, and we truly hope that you have gained valuable input and more ideas. Now, please spare some time to complete the survey form we've prepared for you at the end of the session. Please also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube for regular news and happenings. Now, on behalf of WIEF Foundation, thank you for joining us today. Stay safe and have a great day ahead.